time. What I really loved about this, so much engagement with each other. And I know that when you were going through many of the questions, I found everybody had done different options. And so my concern was that we were going to have, in the disruption, everybody was going to do the same thing. But when I went from table to table, I didn't find any duplicates. So congratulations on that. We're going to get ready for lunch here in just a moment. And I just want to say, Aaron, thank you. Aaron has traveled from Colorado to be with us, and we're so glad that he's here. And did such a great job.
And yes, I actually have 11 children.
Yes, I can vouch for that. And I have met the 17-year-old, and I'll pray for you. Yeah.
Park fire, which impacted 4 counties in Northern California, but destroyed homes in Butte and Tehama counties. And we were able to use VisionLink to assist households in Tehama County. We were able to use it at our local assistance center, which was amazing because we were able to give each resident, each person that came in, an ID number, and they didn't have to tell their story every single time they came to a table. We were able to just pull up that ID number and see which resources were given to community members. And then, since the fire has not been federally declared yet, we're now able to provide a disaster case management service and software to our disaster case managers so they can do the work while we're waiting for a federal declaration that we don't know if we're going to get or not. So it's super useful, super amazing, and we were able to call into Northern California Voad and say, hey, there is a need here. Another Voad outside of our region said, we can help meet that need, and that's just the power of Voad. So thank you so much to Cadre. Thank you so much to Kevin Cox and his team for being able to provide this service to Butte and Tehama counties, because this just helped our disaster case managers hit the ground running to help our community members recover that much quicker. So that's just our testimony about VisionLink, and we were super excited to be able to utilize it and get the ball rolling, because we don't have time to waste when it comes to helping our community members recover.
Beauty, thank you very much. And we're going to have a special performance here for you in just a moment, but I just want to tack on something real quick, a 1 minute here. What Marsha brought to us is we saw the vision of what it could do, hence VisionLink. And it was developed as a case management software. But now what we've been able to do, we took it one step even further. We've now developed to be used in local assistance centers where we're collecting the information. We do have an MOU that we do with the local county. We can hand off the information to the local county on assistance, or excuse me, we actually do put a dollar amount to the assistance, but we can show them what the local level of disaster damage they had. It's got a lot of creative benefits to it, but we do not give government access to the files. So all the information is well protected, but we just give a report. And that's also done through an MOU. The other thing, working with Marsha, what we've been able to do is we have put together a construction component. So now on the backside, as I'm a builder, as a builder, we put our information into what's going on. We get all the quotes, all the information, and the case managers who start with the client and end with the client, they are able to jump over to the construction site, and they can inform their clients where they're at in their process, in their recovery, in the rebuilds. And I just think it's been such a phenomenal, being an old timer, what I get excited about, this has probably advanced us more in the last 3 years than we have in the last 25 that I've been in part of the Voad. But the other thing that I want to just to help you understand is every agency gets to retain their own data. And that is the beautiful part of what we've been able to accomplish with this. And Marsha doesn't get enough credit. This is something that is absolutely huge and a huge benefit. If you want to find out more about it, we'd love to talk to you ahead of time. Reach out to one of our Voad members and we can get connected on that. They do tremendous work. And so at this time, I want to invite up 3 individuals, I want to invite Valeri Mihanovich, Zach Corbo, and Dave Reid, if he's here somewhere. And we're going to have you sit up here at the panel. And I'd like to welcome you because, as it was mentioned earlier today, we are the gap. It starts with us, it ends with us and the volunteers. And our government is limited to what they can provide. That's why we need a partnership. They need us as much as we need them. And working together, we're able to accomplish what we haven't been able to do for years. So I'm going to turn it over to these guys. And let me just do another quick introduction for you all. This is Zachary Corbo. Zachary is with the private sector and NGO. Yeah. Zach has been a big help to us, especially in the cleanup phase as we are going into some of these communities. This is Valeri Mihanovich, who is our state val. Yeah. We love her dearly, yes, thank you all. She's also part of the Trinity. And this is Dave Reid from Santa Cruz, and he's with emergency management. So, panel, we're going to turn it over to you. You can start with your presentations.
Oh,
Sorry.
Okay. No, thank you so much. Appreciate the introduction. Thank you. I thought I had 6 more minutes, but I appreciate starting early because I like to talk a lot. So now I get 21 minutes. Buckle up. So as introduced, my name is Zachary Corbo. I have the pleasure of working at Cal OES, specifically within the Office of Private Sector and NGO Coordination, which my boss, Abby Browning, likes to lovingly refer to as external affairs on steroids, because all of our partners essentially are partners that we don't pay, that don't actually have to do anything that we ask them to do, and we ask a lot of them. And I think it's a lot more fun that way. If you're non-governmental, you're a partner of ours. And it's everything from the Walmart, the Home Depot, the Lowe's, is it Vons here? Safeway, okay, so it's all the same. Different logo on the building. Everything from our private sector partners to a non-governmental. All of you in the room, likely, who represent a non-governmental agency, a CBO, an FBO, you're a partner of ours too. And why that matters is that because I work for you. My whole team, our entire job, is to coordinate with you and share information before a disaster, during a disaster, and help assist with recovery in any way that we can. And we do that a couple of different ways. For those who are familiar with our activation name, if the State Operations Center is activated, we may turn on the Business Operations Center. Who's familiar with the Business Operations Center or the BOC? Hey, that's not too bad. It means we're doing our jobs. For those that you aren't, there's quite literally a room in the State Operations Center up in Sacramento at Cal OES, and our job is to sit there and gather information and share it with our partners. We have this nice long listserv that if we're activated and we're distributing daily reports, you will receive essentially the same information that our government partners do related to the disaster. The size of the fire, the road closures, status proclamations and declarations. There's some of these reports end up being dozens and dozens and dozens of pages long, and we strip out all the stuff that you don't need or care about. That's also, protected government information. You don't need to know. I don't need to know most of that stuff. So we save that information, we cut it out, and we share a report. So if you're not on and have never received the Business Operations Center's situation reports, I have a stack of cards. Take one, email me, or just give me your email address and I will add it. I can do it today. And then the next time the State Operations Center is activated or the Business Operations Center is activated, you'll receive that information. So that's just one of the easy ways that we're able to share information with you, our partners. And that is also bi-directional. So we will share a bunch of information with you, but if you as a non-governmental or a private sector partners have questions about what's going on, where can we help? Has a state of emergency been declared? Has FEMA been requested? Just ask. Again, we work for you. That's our job. If we don't have the answer in the BOC, we will walk over to the person in the State Operations Center that has the question. Some examples of that is if a fire is in your area and you happen to have a very critical piece of your infrastructure as an organization, this is typically on our private sector side, We may not know about that. Our fire commanders may not know about that. It's probably buried in some plan somewhere. We had a large healthcare organization a couple of years ago that had a data center near a fire area. They casually called us and said, hey, just so you know, if that building goes down, we lose 50% of our patient information. So we'd really like that not to go down. So we walked over to the fire desk and we said, did you know that nondescript building over there happens to be a data center? Because you don't put markings on data centers because then they become targets. The fire commander said, I don't think we knew that. We were going to make extra protections around that building then. On the nonprofit side of the world, I think what we try and do is share information to ensure that you have what you need to provide services. If that's when road closures occur, evacuation numbers, we get very interested. Number of structures destroyed or damaged, we have that information, and if it's releasable, we will release it to you. I know some organizations make their operational decisions based on that. If it's releasable, we will share it to you. Sometimes the information we have is ballparks at best, submitted through local governments who are trying to understand the scale of their disaster. They'll send us a number. We say, this is what we think we have in terms of destroyed structures. We go, okay, good to know. That's not always the most accurate until it's further validated. The other thing that we do in my office is we run the state's Emergency Support Function 17. For those who don't know what ESFs are, because you don't really need to, and it's another acronym, I feel like I need to put $1 in a jar every time I use an acronym. I'm paid by the government, so I don't only have so many dollars in my pocket. But Emergency Support Function 17 is volunteer and donations management. Effectively, what that means is anything related to volunteers or the management of in-kind or financial donations goes through my team. We share some of these responsibilities with our partner agency, California Volunteers, but effectively, when the State Operations Center is activated or during preparedness or during recovery, we help manage some of those relationships. Why I bring this up is because we have a new program that started about a year ago now that's still in its beta stage. It's the California In-Kind Donations Portal. A number of years ago, there was this big pandemic. You probably read about it in the newspapers. That's all the laughs I get for the COVID pandemic? I mean, that was a decent joke. That's right, exactly. We're still recovering from lunch. During COVID, typically the state's position on donations is we don't accept them. The state does not need to accept goods. We have a government credit card. We will swipe the government credit card. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Thank you so much. Suchi, everybody. Wow. This is actually really cool. That's incredible. Thank you. Oh, this has Listos logo on it, so technically I paid for this. Joking. I know, we collectively as taxpayers. But the California In-Kind Donations Portal is this really neat software. It was thrown together during COVID because all the rules went out the window. The government did, in fact, need to accept donated goods from private businesses because we needed everything and we couldn't get it fast enough to serve our citizens. What was determined is that we really should probably have something in place, planning, to mitigate this disaster if there's ever a large-scale incident or a decent-sized incident. So what we've developed through legislation and some funding is the California In-Kind Donations Portal. And it provides the opportunity for private sector partners and nonprofits to offer things in a disaster. It's built on top of Salesforce, so it works pretty well and it integrates with a lot of our other products. But we are currently in a beta stage, so we're enrolling our operational area county partners to ensure that they have access to the offers when they come through. What this may mean for you as a nonprofit or as a local government is we oftentimes during big disasters get offers of things from big corporations that you know quite well. What we're trying to do is have them centralized into one system. I want to offer you a truckload of this. I want to offer you a pallet of that. Put it in this system. Our OAS team takes a look at it and says, yep, that seems like a valid donation. We don't think we need any more information. If we do, we'll kick it back and say, hey, how many pallets? How many products are on that pallet? Are you going to deliver it? Because you can send me a truck, but if I can't receive it, what's good is the truck. We will then, once we release it, we send it down to the operational area that's impacted by the disaster. It is then incumbent on our OA partners, our county partners, to say, okay, we don't think we need this as a government. Perhaps our local Voad could use a truckload of cleaning supplies. So this is where I foot stomp that you need to have a working relationship with your county operational area emergency management agency. And I want to give a special shout out to the emergency management agencies in the room. I know it's often difficult to prioritize attending some of these day-long conferences when we have 1,000 things going on and not a very big team. So much appreciation to the government agencies who are here. I also know it's very hard as a nonprofit to find funding to sometimes attend to these, either to travel or to lodge overnight. So if you have questions about our in-kind donations portal, feel free to come snag me. Like I said, I have a big stack of cards. We're not yet enrolling private sector or nonprofit partners, but we can get you on a list of those who can receive that information when it starts going out. We want to make sure our government partners can access it before we start inputting those offers. So that's the California in-kind donations portal. One of the cool things about that is actually written in the legislation is if you're a private business and you offer a good and is accepted by the county or the local government, there's then a liability shield that's baked into the legislation. So one of the concerns we often hear from our private sector is, if I give you a thing and that thing ends up going wrong, will I get sued? Probably. This is California. So in the legislation is some level of liability protection for them. Obviously, it's a little new, so it hasn't all been worked out on the regulation side of the world, but it's one of the cool parts. The other thing that we do in our office is we are the gateway for philanthropy. We have a relationship with Philanthropy California. Again, the state does not take in private dollars. If a big corporation or a mom and pop shop or a random Joe citizen wants to donate to the disaster, they frequently go to the state and they say, the state, here's my check. Government does not need your money unless it's the IRS or the FTB. We don't like taking your dollars. We're also not the best at spending them at the most local level. That really should be done by a local community foundation. So what we do is if a local community foundation exists and they've opened a disaster fund, Philanthropy California will vet that fund and then place it on their active current disaster fund website, and that's what we promote. If the local government says, hey, this is the fund that we want you to promote, we will promote that. So again, we are often asked to promote things through our channels and our lists. Of course we will. We promote one thing, Philanthropy California. It's the one page that has all of the different funds. This is my plug for having a relationship with your local community foundation in advance of the disaster. They're not frequently a partner that thinks that they need to come to these events or is often invited to the disaster table. And this isn't the case in every county or every city. Some of them have really strong relationships. But you as a nonprofit, or if you're a local government, if you have a local community foundation, step one, Google, area community foundation. One of the three things that Kevin said that you need to write down, this is one of those. If you don't know whether you have a local community foundation, find out. Number two, do they do a disaster fund? Have they ever done that before? Is there a written agreement about a disaster fund? What does that look like after a disaster? If they've done it before and they do it well, great. Check the box. If they don't, and you're a local government, figure out how you work with them to develop a disaster fund after the disaster. Because large organizations frequently have these great mechanisms to take in dollars. Our friends at the Red Cross are excellent at public relations when it comes to, if you want to help the disaster, donate to the Red Cross. You can push a button at the local Walmart, you can text in, absolutely incredible ability to get the word out there. What I like to do is say, that's awesome, donate to the Red Cross, big fan, they do incredible work. But also your local community foundation probably wants your dollars too. Those local community foundations are often a lot better at getting dollars out to local organizations than some of the larger foundations or national organizations. It's just baked into their ethos as a community foundation. How many of you are in areas that have a local community foundation? Yes, big fan. Oftentimes, in a lot of cases, it's the local United Way, and they are experts. I'm not just saying that because they helped pay for this year conference, but United Way of Northern California has done this. They do it well. And I happen to know that they're usually pretty good about sharing their successes with other United Ways or community foundations. As we've talked about a ton, we have a couple of areas in California that have experienced disaster at a disproportionate rate, which means they've learned a lot. They're often really good at sharing what they know. So if your local community foundation has never done a disaster fund, or your local United Way doesn't really know how that might work, phone a friend. Steal their good ideas and say that they were yours. Because at the end of the day, it's really the survivor that benefits from somebody else's successes. Just trying to make sure I don't forget all these really exciting things I wrote down. So moving from what my office does to some takeaways that I want you to take away from my experience in disaster. The first thing is, whether you're a nonprofit or your local government, what is your volunteer and donations management plan? When was the last time you looked at that plan? Are all the partners that you say are going to do things in that plan aware that you said you were going to do them? Probably not. When is the last time you trained or exercised your current plan? Did you include the stakeholders that you said had responsibilities in your plan in said training and exercise? Maybe, maybe not. Not every county, not every local government is or is not good at that. But I think that's one of the takeaways I'd have for nonprofits. If you operate in a single service area or a region, pull some of those plans. They're public documents. Take a look and see what the local government has said it will do in volunteer and donations management in a response to a disaster. That is their plan. It is a public document. If you have comments on that plan, reach out to the local government, and maybe when they do a rewrite, suggest some of those things. Don't assume that your local emergency management knows who you are or what your capabilities are. Some large organizations, we know they have television commercials, they put their names on billboards, we know them, we love them. If you don't have a relationship with your local emergency management, during a disaster, they're either going to forget that they've met you before or not remember what your capabilities are. They may recognize a logo, they may recognize a name. This is one of those takeaways. Have a one-pager on what your organization is and could do that's ready to fly during a disaster. This is land of the government. We love one-pagers, which usually end up becoming one each side. It's 2 pages. Technically, is not a 2-pager. I'm just saying. So that's one of my key takeaways. If you could be a well-established, recognized organization, or you could be a local organization that wants to get into the disaster space, if you can't explain what you're going to do in a disaster on 1-2 pages, you might want to think about condensing down your operational goals anyways, but have that ready to fly for me during a disaster. If I'm a local government responding to a big scale emergency, I have about 1,000 things to do. I wish that was an exaggeration because the state needs things from me, and that's a priority. My local governments need things from me, and potentially there's dozens of local jurisdictions, all with certain needs and wants. And then I have electeds that have needs, wants, desires, and plans. That is all. This is the unfortunate job of a county emergency management. I'm sure Dave will speak to it later. Everything flows through them, which then means they get all the problems. We ask a lot of them as a state, and their local jurisdictions ask a lot of them. You as a local nonprofit or even a national or international organization, just understand they have 1,000 things going on. So I beg of you on their behalf for patience, but persistence. It's not personal when they don't return your phone calls. It's not personal when they don't respond to your emails, but be persistent. because that thing that you're trying to offer may actually be a need that I have. You just have to remind me that you exist. That's why, if you don't have a Voad, help build one. I want to make a real strong plug. I've seen communities responding to a disaster that have a Voad, and I've seen them when they don't have a Voad. And let me tell you, this is my own personal opinion, it looks a lot better when there is a Voad. Like I said, I've seen it when there isn't, and I've seen it when there is. And having to build the Voad ship while you're leaving the harbor of the disaster it never goes well, because you end up leaving organizations out that really should have been at the table, or you don't really get the full spectrum of what's going on. It just doesn't go well. I think the Tale of Two Disasters is a good example from earlier. I spent some time in Florida quite recently responding to the hurricanes, and the area that I was deployed to did not have a Voad. And let me tell you, I wish we did, because we had to build it while the water was rising, and it doesn't go well. It went fine, it didn't go great. One of the other points I wanted to make sure to mention in my remaining couple of minutes is trust but verify. There will always be needs after a disaster. We will hear about them, the media will cram them down our throats, but verify what those needs are before you load up your truck. If you call me with a 53-foot truck of stuff and you're already en route, I'm not going to be happy about it. I got some of those calls recently. I know some of our counties get those calls frequently. Don't load up your truck full of stuff based on what you think people need, and then expect me to deal with it when it arrives in my operational area or into our state. It's incredible that people spend their time, effort, treasure, and talent to support survivors after a disaster, and we likely need some of those things in this truck, but rarely do we need everything that you think the county or the local operational area needs or the survivors need. So before you load up the truck, before the truck leaves the station, have a conversation with who's going to receive the truck, or whatever it is you may be. I think I want to give a shout out to Valeri Brown's point earlier. Before you deploy into an area, trust that there probably is a need, but verify what that need is and where you need to go. Because for all you know, the call that I just took before you called me was another organization saying, I can do the same thing you can, and I'm going to go to this area. If you didn't call me, I'm not going to tell you that you wouldn't know that. The final point I wanted to make before I pass it over to our illustrious State Val is be welcoming to those pop-up organizations, because oftentimes they represent and they look like the community that was ravaged by the disaster. If your county or area frequently has disasters in a certain part of your county, your partners usually look like the survivors in that part of the county. If you happen to have a disaster in a different part of the county, a more urban area or a more rural area, the partners don't always look like the survivors. That then means the survivors may not trust you, but they're going to trust these pop-up organizations because they're probably their neighbors. They're probably the folks that they've went to school with. And I know it can be difficult to work with pop-up organizations for liability reasons, you don't know what their capabilities are, you're worried about some of their operations. Take them under your wing, because we have seen that they are incredible powerhouses that want to do the best for their community. But they're not always welcome at the Voad table in every area. You can help bring them under your wing. I've seen it happen both ways, where they were welcomed and they weren't. This is my plea to you in my final 30 seconds that expired a minute ago. This is my plea to you, is to, if they're a reputable organization and they seem to be doing good work, bring them under your wing, because at the end of the day, the survivors will really appreciate it. That's all for me.
Great, exactly. A lot of really great information there, and I have several comments, but I'm going to save those for our question and answering. What we're going to do, we're going to pass it over to Valeri, and then Dave, what we're going to do, we've got a little thing that we're going to throw here. We're going to separate between the state and the county. So after Valeri's done, get your questions ready, because we're going to do questions with our state, and then we're going to turn it over to Dave, and then allow you to have questions with the local EMA. So does that make sense? Great, great. And Zachary, my apologies for just handing you a mic to tell you to go. You know, I got shamed for that. So I need to do a better job at emceeing here. So I want to introduce you once again to our state val, who we all truly love, and it has made working in California so much better when you have a val who understands. She was one of us. She came from her background was from volunteer organizations, and she'll tell you more about that. But
Kevin, what is a val? What's a val?
Now, thanks, Zach. Sorry. Hang on. I'm going to pay it forward because I know I'm going to mess up. Mike's going to be, let me get off the stage because it's their time. Our voluntary agency liaison from the state, and I have been working with Vals for over 25 years. Nobody does it better than our Valeri Mihanovich. Valeri?
Is my mic hot? Yeah. Okay. Did I have a PowerPoint with this one, Adriana, or is that come? Oh, well, because I have to apologize. I've been on vacation for a week and a half, and I came back late Friday night, helped my son move out over the weekend, so I am like totally off the wall in this presentation. But I usually am anyway. That's my normal stuff, and I can't sit still. So, thank you, Zachary, because really, we work as a team here, so, and we rely on each other a lot when we're overwhelmed. And I know most of you, but man, I heard San Luis Obispo, Monterey folks I haven't met yet from Voad, so please, if I find you, whatever, say hi, and anybody else I haven't met, because I try to know as many people as I can in this job. So, my background, just for a minute here, is Kevin. This little forward. Okay, got it. So, my background is most of my career has been in non-profit world, begging for scraps, begging for money. I know what it's like to be in your shoes. I know what it's like to offer these great services for the community. I ran Sacramento Region Voad since its beginning in 2005, all the way till I left for the state during COVID in 2020. And it was really hard to leave nonprofit world, and I don't think I ever have, because I'll work for the state, but I'm always saying we when I'm talking about all of you. We this, we that, and everybody reminds me, you're us, you're the state. But you're always in my heart. What you do is really important, and my job as the voluntary agency liaison is to know what you do and put the spotlight on all of you and sing the praises of what all of you are doing in the community. That's what's important. And in any way that I can possibly help find funding, find grants or whatever, I'm there. I've been begging far too long for money to sustain the programs I used to run. So I know it's hard out there, and you do really good work. And the community is not going to survive in a disaster without what you're doing. Government will tell you 100 times in all their PowerPoints, voluntary organizations are there in the beginning and they're there at the end. But that's a lot of money to help sustain your services in between. So I'm there with you always. So that's kind of a little background on me. And I advocate for you. You're number one. They probably want to fire me several times for my just like getting on my stupid soapbox to government and others to say, no, but these guys are out there doing this, and this survivors. San Diego, I've had to pitch so many times to our government partners. This is what I'm seeing. These folks are living on a dirt floor. They're back in their mold-ridden homes. We need to get in. And I will yell and I will scream of whatever I can do to try to move any kind of needle I can from government. As you know, government, we don't have much money, but we do our best to help. So that's the role of the voluntary agency liaison. Know that I always want to have your back and always be there for you. And if you don't have my contact information, get it. You can ask me any question. I won't pretend that I know it. I'll ask Zachary or somebody else. Debris. How many debris questions do I get? When is debris coming? When, are we going to get a debris mission? All this stuff. I don't know the answer, but like Zachary's saying, we're within 50 feet or so or a building away from the answer. So please fire away. No question is a stupid question because I probably asked a million of those. So anyway, that's a little, right, that way.
That way?
Oopsie, did I go too? Yeah. I want to do death by PowerPoint. So, was that my first one? I guess so. Individual assistance. So with the state of California, the voluntary agency liaison sits under individual assistance. And when we think of individual assistance, we help individuals. What? Oh, loud. Okay.
No, you're not.
I don't want to be too loud. So we help individuals. We don't have money. We support FEMA when they have an individual assistance declaration. And then our programs go into motion. And we do a lot of pre-disaster coordination and guidance. We do local assistance centers. So outside of the disaster or before a disaster has been declared, the local county would contact Callaway as individual assistance for help in coordinating their local assistance center. And that's where we would get our state agencies, insurance, DMV, housing community development, those programs that could be there at your local assistance center. My job, I get the fun job because I get to contact all of you. So don't hang up on me when you see me calling. It means, and I'll run a list to the county. I go, well, you have Suchi and this is what they provide. And you have United Methodist and this is what they do. Red Cross, they already know Red Cross. But I mentioned all of our programs and forgive me if I didn't mention you. But they could be at your local assistance center too. And they offer very valuable programs. Really happy with seeing our disaster case managers lean in more at the local assistance center level, so we can start with a little bit of case work or case management if we get it, and we're really in touch with our survivors at that point. I don't know if I can't remember, it's been 2 weeks trying to remember what was in this PowerPoint, but another really important part of what we do at the local assistance center is very new, Vision Link. And we bring in Kevin with Hope Crisis Response Network. They come with their volunteer resource village resources. And it's a one-stop for you counties. It's one-stop intake of our survivors. So even if you don't get a FEMA declaration, they check in with our system, and it's a system that can't be shared with everybody. You have to have an MOU, and if you're a direct, if you can directly help people like the Red Cross or Suchi and Episcopal, Southern Baptist, others who are there. And we can get them in that system. And the best part about it is you get, oh my God, Kevin, it's only been 2 months. You get a little name tag. Yeah, you get a little name tag as a survivor. So you recognize this, hey, Valerie, how are you doing today? Not number 123, or please tell me your story again, what happened to your house. It's all in Vision Link. So you know before they come to the table what their needs are. Did they lose everything? Did they only have some damage? Were they evacuated so long that all their food has spoiled and they don't have money to pay for it? You know about that ahead of time as you come to your table, and you can really treat them with a survivor-centric, which you all do anyway, focus. So can't say enough about Vision Link and all of you who've been working on that program. It was really successful in Tehama and Lake County recently, and we'd love to see this in more counties. I don't have any stock in Vision Link. I'm just a supporter of our nonprofits that are part of it. So I just want to make that clear. I've been asked that by the state why I keep promoting it. It's like, it's not the system, it's the people behind it. So, but individual assistance, we also keep an eye on our counties. We participate in county meetings. We participate in Voad meetings. So in blue skies, when and if we ever have them, knocking on any kind of wood possible, I like to be on your Voad meetings too. So if you don't have me on your list, please add me to it. And my name's impossible to spell, so I'm happy to give you my email. think it's at the end of this too. And then the confusion I didn't know about when I came to the state. I didn't know the difference between individual assistance and public assistance. But individual assistance is people. And in a disaster, we run all the FEMA grant. It passes from FEMA through us, through California Department of Social Services. There's the FEMA programs for disaster case management, and Renee Jackson's in the back. Thank you, Renee, for really making this program great. And when FEMA brings in the funds, we work with all the parties together to get those contracts in place to have faster disaster case management. Also goes for the crisis counseling program. That comes through the FEMA grant. It comes through individual assistance. We basically are the branch that helps survivors, people. Public assistance is all the stuff I get calls about, and I have to figure out where to send it to. But it's more, these are the debris, buildings, infrastructure, schools, sewers, things like that. That's public assistance, which sounds a lot like individual because it's public, but this is stuff, things. And then I think I already went through this, but it's the VAL. I can be your contact or anybody's contact, that conduit of information, that conduit of, when I'm on a meeting, I may hear things on the meetings. I may hear needs, unmet needs that I can reach out to other Voad organizations that are outside your area, help bring them to the table. And Zachary, I appreciate what you said about those pop-up local organizations. They're so important, and they know the survivors, a lot of them. Those are the ones who are one-on-one, have the rapport, and know who's been harmed, who needs help. And I think a lot of VOADs realized this during COVID. I had a huge 150-something VOAD distribution list, but it didn't include a lot of our local churches that fed people. And when feeding was so important, and in so many, Sacramento is such a diverse community that we had various faiths, religion, minority groups, immigrant groups, and they were all out there serving people. And so COVID helped bring them into the fold. And they could, especially when I was in the Emergency Operations Center, hey, Valeri, do you have a connection to the Afghan population? We'd love to get resources out to them. What do you know about the Ukrainian population? Well, they've all been brought into our listserv. So that VOAD, that communication and collaboration among VOADs, just knowing who does what is so important. And that's why VOADs are so important, is that if you meet regularly and you know who does what, you're so far ahead of the game. And I know we've already said that so many times, but part of my job is to know who's doing what in the various communities. So when these questions come up or needs come up, I can help be a connector too. And then, like I said, we're just a critical link between you, the community, and government. And sometimes FEMA isn't always here. They can't be here. I can also help be that link too and connect you with the various parts of FEMA. So sometimes I feel like I don't know enough when it's on recovery, like I don't have the money and I don't have the resources, but I try my best. And then, like I said, we're in all phases of recovery. And since I've been around, it's always been recovery. So not so much blue sky. There's always something going on in California, which probably it's just the state these days. And then preparedness. I'm just like repeating here. I just realized. So we just do a lot of getting to know who does what, meeting relationships. Staff changes quite frequently, so I always appreciate the handover. Like, I'm retiring now, but I want to introduce you to so-and-so, and please bring them into the fold, and I connect them with NorCal Voad or SoCal Voad or wherever they're located. Thank you, Mike. And that's preparedness and response. Again, I help support the local assistance center, volunteer donations management. That's the world I came from. I worked for a volunteer center, so we were under the our program ran the donations management plan and the volunteer management plan. I know volunteer centers, a lot of them don't exist anymore, so it's been a lot of big challenge on how to manage spontaneous volunteers, but also how to keep and post volunteer opportunities when our communities need help in the recovery phase. So I have a lot of experience in that area because I lived it. And so please reach out to me with how to get volunteer opportunities out there, how to manage volunteers. I know a lot about donations management. Like Zachary was saying, really important to have that plan in place. Who's doing what and how? Really, and I know volunteers is a challenge, donations is a challenge, but the more you have that in challenge, beg, borrow, steal, and then make it local. Did it die? Thank you. And then again, supporting the local assistance center and the Vision Link program and supporting AFN needs. So, does your community, we found out in Monterey County last year, there were languages that I myself hadn't heard of, Mixteco and Zapoteca. I think a couple of the language, Trinki, I'm probably saying it wrong, but we made sure that we got translators, the state did, for those local assistance centers and disaster recovery centers. So we always ask on our local assistance center meetings what language needs, any other special needs, low reading capability, all those things. And then, there we go. See, we've hit the end. And during recovery, FEMA Val and we help, and Kevin and all our NorCal Voad partners, we can help you with your long-term recovery group formation. We can help bring in the players when they're needed from outside. We're here to support you, and no matter what. And I try to, I'm still involved with some of our 2020 wildfire long-term recovery groups, so I can pop in. And so I'm always here. So always feel free to ask the question, ask for help, whatever. That's what we're here to do. And and advocate for all of you. Let me know of your needs. Let me know what you're seeing, and we try our best. That's my impossible to spell name, so please stay in touch.
Thank you, Val. Oops. Are we better now? There we are. And turn yours off, yeah. So Zachary, you made a really... Gotta let the sound guy do his thing. Is this much better now? Yes. Yeah. Nothing can make me sound better, but at least it's better. So Zachary, you made a comment, and we're gonna take a couple questions here in a moment, but it's really important that we point this out. Zachary made a comment about how he gets a phone call about people not vetting their transportation or needs, and then calling up and expecting them to be delivered. But one of the other things is the frustrating part: people calling you up and asking you for transportation. And we have to make sure that in your community, when you say that you want to do a donation drive and you want to send, as Zachary pointed out, not only do you vet it, but you're also responsible for the transportation and where it goes. Don't call the government and expect them to give you the transportation that you need, because that's not their job. We need to make sure that you understand that, because it gets very frustrating for me when I get phone calls saying, hey, I've got all this stuff, but I don't know how to get it there. Well, you should have thought about that before you did that. We talk about used clothing, how we despise that part of it. What we tell people is, if you want to give, go ahead and do a garage sale with your used items, and then give the money over to your community foundation or the Red Cross or the Salvation Army. And then Valeri, one thing I want to point out, our Val has been so committed for 3 years now, since she's been in that position. Every Friday, we have a little think tank call, and she has been so dedicated to be a part of that. And 4 or 5 of us get on the line and we talk about solutions for our communities and what can we do to help. So I just wanted to point those out on those two, and then we're going to move to Dave here in just a moment. But questions, please. Oh, here we over here. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a quick question, and I hope I don't make a fool of myself. How often do you get organizations that have to do with older adults or folks with disabilities, folks with that kind of access and functional needs in the think tank calls? And should more of us be there? I want to make sure that we are there and we talk about accessibility and make sure that things can work for folks. Thanks.
Great question, Valeri.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. I'm sure Valerie will as well. So I think from the state perspective, we're quite fortunate to have within the Cal OES structure an Office of Access and Functional Needs. Vance Taylor's fantastic. So we're fortunate that because we're the state and we are a large agency, we have an access and functional needs team. We have an office. I think there's 8 people. I'm trying to remember. They always have great potlucks because their cubes are right next to ours. I'm wondering who I need to talk to for an invite. But they're great. So that's at the state level, we're fortunate to have both the funding and that as a priority, that we have that. And he has a network of independent living centers and an access and functional needs advisory committee, a statewide access and functional needs advisory committee. So again, at the state, we obviously usually have more resources than the local government does. And I don't know if Dave has anything he wants to add to that question, but that is from the state perspective what we would recommend. And local governments can obviously tap into that as a resource.
And I'll just add, as Voad startup, when we get new Voad starting up and I'm helping them with ideas to build their listserv and who should be part of that, I always tell them to go to, okay, I'm going to use an acronym, please. You said it or it spelled it out, CFIL. Okay, CFIL, California
Foundation of Independent Living Centers.
So that's where I tell them to go to make sure you find your local partner and bring them in. And most counties also have an access functional needs specialist. So you bring those into your VOAD as well. So we try to be, that is critical. And seniors as well. Senior organizations are also, area agencies on agents are also really important to have.
Any other questions? So I have a question for you, Valerie, since we don't have any other questions. Between the three of you, you can answer this. One, you talked about how funding is really tough at times, and sometimes when we get a federal disaster, there are times we get SBA, and there are times that we don't get the actual declaration for IA, but we may get an SBA. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
What are these acronyms?
I already paid for it, thank you. I knew I was going to do that. Small Business Administration, and that's so confusing because when a survivor gets a letter in the mail from the Small Business Association, it goes in the trash because they don't think that, but that's the disaster loan program for families in need. So Valerie? Or Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to it in a little bit more depth when I start my blathering, but on some level, there's an important opportunity now with the SBA where you don't, as you said, you don't have to have the Federal Individual Assistance Declaration to get an SBA declaration. And so there's an effort involved in doing that, and we want to encourage our VOAD members as well as our local government to look into what that threshold is. We were able to achieve it for the 2024 disaster, which only had public assistance declaration at the state level. It gave at least some people the opportunity to get some funding, low interest loans to help them in the recovery space.
Great, thank you, Dave. And I think that it's, how many case managers are in the room? Okay, a few of you. That's why it's so important to know your resources, and knowing whether you have SBA and then how to access that. So moving ahead, I want to introduce one more thing from Valerie.
One more thing about SBA, because I learned so much about it in San Diego as well. And I'm not speaking on behalf of SBA, but it is a really important loan. The threshold is, Chris, 25, I think, my partner that did an SB. Homes, not businesses, thank you. So the threshold is 25. So it's a lot lower, and they're very, very low interest loans. And you don't have to pay them off right away. And the thing is, what happens is people go, oh, I can't do a loan right now. But then they end up charging up on an 18% interest Visa card. And so you can accept the loan, but you don't have to use it. So it's just a really important tool to remember. And we are currently we have SBA declarations for the Park Fire. That's Tehama, Butte, and Kern counties. For the Burrell Fire, we have it for Lake County. I know I'm going to miss a couple. For the Boyles Fire, Chinatown Fire in LA and just the city of LA, an apartment that burned. So we do have several SBA declarations right now. And as soon as you get that declaration, they'll open up their assistance center, which I know has a different name, and they'll start a, yes, business.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
appreciate that, Valerie. We talked about how important it is to make sure that disasters are at the local level, and that we are making sure that as we are working together, that our lead, and it looks like we have one more question before I introduce Dave.
Thank you. Would you address the issue of appealing FEMA and SBA, please?
Could you be slightly more specific? Because, yeah, we could talk about FEMA appeals until the cows come home.
I just think it's important that we address the issue that if they don't appeal, that they have that right. They don't just get declined and then that's it. That they can appeal it, resubmit, and stay in the loop in case they need it.
Yeah, I think one of the key points to make is FEMA, in its taking a lot of feedback from both states and survivors and other organizations, made some pretty significant changes to its individual assistance policy this year. So no longer is a survivor required to apply for SBA, Small Business Administration, in order to then receive the other bucket of funding. So in FEMA land, individual and households program, there are two buckets of funding, often referred to by the amount of money you can receive, $43,600 now with the new fiscal year. There are two buckets with $43,600 cap. It used to be you could apply for the first one, you then had to ask SBA for permission, effectively, to apply for the second one. That is no longer the case. They get to move right into the other bucket, which other needs assistance. I will also note on appeals, you can survivors can appeal any decision FEMA makes on their application once. That individual action you can appeal once. You could submit a dozen appeals, but they would all need to be for individual needs. Yeah, so we could talk all day, every day about FEMA appeals, but I would make sure that folks, if you are a case manager, you're receiving the most updated possible information about FEMA and its new programs, and working with our individual assistance team at OES, because they are frequently either changing the rules globally, or individual decisions are being made about a certain disaster, and there's sometimes minor policy changes that really matter for the survivor.
Thank you, Zach. And I know that our friend James Corbo in our recovery session might address a little bit more about that. But I want to introduce Dave Reid to you. Dave Reid is with is in the emergency services in Santa Cruz. As I started to tell you earlier, it's so important for us to be connected to the local EMA. It's so important that in the midst of this disaster that we are working under their leadership and partnering and walking alongside. And so they will ensure that we get connected. So Dave, thank you. I know you've done that very, very well in Santa Cruz, and we sure appreciate you.
Thanks for having me here this afternoon. I'm going to start, since we just had lunch, I'm going to ask everybody to stand up if you don't mind. So the first thing I want to do, to the point that was just made, I want to see a show of hands. Who has my cell phone or a counterpart's cell phone in a county so you can communicate directly with the emergency manager or a deputy or somebody? It's a good number of hands. So again, I want you to have my phone number. If you live in Santa Cruz County and work in Santa Cruz County, you need to have your emergency management organization's contact information so that you can communicate directly to them, because we are imperfect humans in a disaster. To quote Supervisor Gore from Sonoma County, it's relentless, imperfect progress, right? So we heard earlier two of our Voad seasoned folks in San Diego and Marin County express challenges, even though they've been doing this for a long time, right? It's never a perfect process. So we want to be working forward with all of you. The next thing I want you to do is just put your hand out for a second while I blather on. Okay, I'm not going to talk for too long, but I wanted to do this physical embodiment exercise to just talk about how hard it is to keep your hand out and what it's like to work alone, right? And so one of the themes of this conference and this conversation, right, is how we are better and stronger together. So if I kept talking and I asked you to keep your hand out, it wouldn't take long before people started to get tired. But it doesn't take much effort for me just to go like this. And so just for a practice, take a moment and put your hand on a shoulder, take a step or two, and put your hand on the shoulder of a person next to you. And how much easier is it to keep your hand out if you can rest it on your neighbor, on your friend, on your colleague, right? So that's what this is about, right? What this process, what this conversation is about is how we are stronger together than individually. So with that, I'll let you sit down. Hopefully that's got your blood flowing a little bit so that I can talk a little bit more. So I was asked, to bring things down in elevation to the local level, and so I just want to talk a little bit about our county's journey. Imperfect as it is, I do want to recognize two people in the room and embarrass them a little bit because I'm just a surrogate for what we do at the county. So Annie Puckett and Amanda Gullings, they're going to have to raise their hands or wave. Two amazing people in our small office that do a lot of this work every day. So it's a team. Even on our side, it's a small team. Some of the counties and cities have bigger teams, but we are all under-resourced across the board at the government level. We could always use more people and money to do the work that we do because it's so important. So I wanted to talk a little bit about relationship and coordination in both preparedness, response, and recovery and what we've been doing, and I'll try and give some specific examples. One of the things at the local government level, especially in the emergency management space, we have a lot of state and federal mandates for certain things that we have to do. Things like an emergency operations plan. So the county operational area, which is also sometimes referred to as the OA, we have to have an emergency operations plan that's reviewed by the state. To prepare that emergency operations plan, we need to communicate with our community. We need to get feedback from our community. All of you are part of that fabric. So I want to just reiterate some of these steps that we have to go through and make sure that you start to plug in your communities to some of those processes, because that helps strengthen that relationship, that proximity, that closeness that you will have with all of us at the local government level. Other things like evacuation plans. That's a very common thing here in California. People are developing and jurisdictions are developing evacuation plans. As part of that, we have to reach out and communicate with the public. We have to communicate with all of you. And so that's another opportunity where you as an organization, whether as an individual organization or as part of your Voad, needs to, and we want you to be connected into that process so that we hear your voices, we hear the voices of those that you represent. The other one is like a local hazard mitigation plan. So FEMA requires that every jurisdiction renew their local hazard mitigation plan every 5 years. And there's a number of new state and federal legislative requirements around how much we communicate with our vulnerable populations, many of those that you all serve. So those are some examples. And what we've tried to do in the county is lean into that communication opportunity. If we have to do that as part of developing something, that is an opportunity for us to foster a stronger relationship with the organizations serving our community that are part of our Voad. So I want to just encourage folks that may not be plugged in to those types of planning efforts that the jurisdictions do to find out how to become a participant and a voice in that process so that that plan is stronger, but also that that relationship is stronger too. The other thing that we do and try and work on, and is an ever-evolving process, is that communication relationship. And I think that was one of the C's in the presentation earlier. And voice amplification, right? So we as government can only reach so far into community. Generally speaking, if you have about 50% of your population registered for your alert and warning system, you think you're winning. And at the government level. And for me personally and professionally, that means I'm missing half of the population when I try and send out an alert that hits your phone or your email or your landline, if you still have one. So it's the trusted voices in the room here, it's the trusted voices in community that are part of the Voad, that are critical in that voice amplification, hopefully ahead of a disaster, so in the preparedness stage, but also in that recovery and response phase. So all the phases, we need your help, and all of you may have constituencies at the nonprofit or non-governmental organization level. all of you have constituencies that we want to tap into. We don't want to take your contacts. That's not appropriate. But we want to give you the information and have you share that out. So we're really trying to do that. One example for us is that we've leaned in to a relationship with our largest school district that serves the southern part of our county, about 10,000 plus families. And a lot of those Latinx community members and indigenous language speaking community members, that school district and all school districts generally have about 100% participation in their communication tools, right? If you are a parent and you have a child in school, you for sure want to know if something bad is going on at the school or something good, or there's an opportunity to meet your teacher, whatever the circumstance. So they have 100% subscribership into that population. We want to tap into that communication network. We want to give those resources or that information that we are sharing out to the school district so that they can have that penetration deeper into the community. The other piece that we've been trying to do to honor the work of CBOs and NGOs is to have contracts in place. So in the arc of recovery, so many of us want to stand up and raise our hand and say, we're ready to do the work. And a lot of organizations will pivot their primary mission to do that response work or that immediate recovery work. And that only lasts so long if we, as government, are not compensating you for your time. And so we have tried to recognize, at least at the start, a handful of organizations that are important in our community that have the resources to do some of the work in response and have standby contracts with them to outline how much we're going to compensate them for and for what work, so that we know and they know that if we ask them to stand up and serve and support, that they're going to be compensated in the near term, and then we as local government will work on the back end to get reimbursed by FEMA, which is a whole other day-long lecture and the problems of FEMA reimbursement. But we recognize that for community organizations, there's only so much you can do in a voluntary or volunteering basis, not voluntary, but volunteering basis, until your staff need to get paid, they need to eat, your organization still needs to maybe have its continuity of operations work, and so that it's hard to pivot and just do one thing in the disaster space. So we've tried to build those contracts, and if anybody wants to talk about the contracts piece, Annie Puckett is your go-to. Couple other thoughts and things to share in terms of the advocacy side of things and kind of how we advocate for long-term recovery and Voad development. Those contracts, I think, are a big piece of it because it shows that we are committed to honoring the work that you are all doing. Another piece is we have tried to, and it's not enough, at the local government level, identify some consistent grant funding. So there are a couple of grants that most local jurisdictions or most operational areas in the state get from the federal government, and we've tried to carve off a little bit of that money. I'd like to make it more to support our long-term recovery group and our Voad, because we know that it takes time, it takes energy, and that organizational structure, that leader that is herding the cats that are in this room, needs to be compensated so that it's a viable, vibrant organization, and it just can't live on volunteer energy alone. And it can't, generally, it's challenging for local government to fund it fully, but we're trying to find ways and creative ways to continue to funnel some money for that sustaining operational baseline. And then another thing that we did locally in starting up our Voad was we partnered with our city of Santa Cruz and city of Watsonville in the county, and we hired a consultant to help us with some of that high-level lane development, like what lane, what role, what's the one sheet for each organization, and try and identify who can play what role, because I think as you're starting a Voad, for those of you who are starting or you're expanding a Voad, that one sheet is critical, as Zach described, and really trying to get people into the lanes and so they feel comfortable doing the work that they're going to do if we ask them to do it. So that consultant that we hired helps kind of talk through with some of our different CBO, NGO groups and identify what lane they were in, and then they kind of gave us hopefully a roadmap that we'll take to strengthening and building our Voad. I want to open it up for questions in a little bit, but I want to touch on a couple other things in terms of our experiences in disaster and some of the lessons learned and some of the failings and things that we've done and are trying to relentlessly move forward in our imperfect process. So we've had 8 federally declared disasters in the last 7 years, not unlike many counties in Northern California. It's one after another. What we have seen in our most impactful one, aside from that pandemic thing that we discussed earlier, was our CZU Lightning Complex fire in 2020. It's the largest wildfire in our history in the county. For those that don't know, Santa Cruz County is the second smallest county by geographic region in the state. We have about 270,000 residents. Half of those are unincorporated residents. So we serve a very disproportionately high population as the county versus many, many counties in the state have a high percentage of their population in incorporated cities. That fire, we lost, numbers depend on how you look at it, but about 1,000 homes. And through that process, and I want to highlight, the reason I'm saying this is I want to highlight something that Zach said. Through that fire, it got a lot of notoriety. Redwood forests were thought to be unburnable from a mega fire standpoint. And, I think ours is one of the larger predominantly redwood forest wildfires in the state's history. A lot of our fires burn in other forested canopies. We were able to bring in, and by we, I mean our community foundation, millions of dollars to support immediate recovery, but also long-term recovery. And one of the things that I cannot take credit for, so I'm conveying this knowledge from our long-term recovery group and from our community foundation, and the learnings that they took from talking with places like Sonoma and others, is that the arc of recovery, depending on the disaster, can take a long, long time. And so there's a tendency to burn through a lot of that, no pun intended, to spend a lot of that money up front because there are a lot of upfront costs and needs for people, clothing, shelter, basic necessities. What our long-term recovery group worked really hard, and I'll give Tanya credit for this, is we've tried to dole that money out judiciously over the arc. It's now 4+ years since that fire, and we're still in the recovery phase for many people. And so when you do collect those monies think about the arc of recovery, depending on the nature of the disaster. Flooding has a much shorter, generally, arc of recovery, whereas fire has a much longer one because you're starting from scratch for many of those folks. So we worked really hard in supporting our long-term recovery group in getting that money out and supporting folks in the long haul that is rebuilding your home and getting back through your front door. County government does not, especially Santa Cruz County government, doesn't often make rebuilding easy. In California, it's very challenging to rebuild. There's lots of steps. It's technically complex. Santa Cruz probably is one of the most technically complex places to rebuild in California, and many of our survivors have struggled because of that. And so it's important to support them through the whole arc. The other thing I wanted to share is we had 2 federally declared disasters, like many folks in this room, in 2023. The January storm sequence and the March storm sequence. And March was most notably known for our neighbors in Monterey and our community members in Pajaro that were flooded when the levee along the Pajaro River failed. One of the things, and this gets to the question about individual assistance, one of the things that we advocated for and fought for with Val's support was keeping our disaster recovery centers, our DRCs, open as long as we could. And the Voad, I want to say that one role of Voad members is to remind their constituencies that are impacted by disaster to go in and register with FEMA. And the reason being, obviously, as Zach said, is there's the fiscal resources, but if you don't register inside that window, then you miss the opportunity. And our small county, second smallest geographically, the smallest geographically is San Francisco, so it's not really a fair comparison. Our small county had the highest individual assistance participation for each disaster individually in the entire state in 2023. individually and collectively. So if you looked at one of the disasters, the January or the March, we had the most IA participation in our county, and that is a testament to keeping the disaster recovery centers open. That's a testament to our CBOs and NGOs communicating to community members to register with FEMA to access those resources, because they are limited and they don't go far enough, and it is very, very difficult to get over the individual assistance hurdle and get the money in your door. It's a pet peeve of mine that FEMA issues what's called a denial letter, and that denial letter is really actually just a request for information. And what we need to do at the Voad level, at the local government level, is to demystify some of that process and explain that when you get a denial letter from the government, that immediately takes probably half the people, and they're going to walk away. They're going to be like, well, I got denied. I don't know why, or I didn't read it, or I don't understand it. And we've got to work through with case managers. We've got to work through at the government level. We've got to work through at the Voad level to demystify that process and keep people in and getting through those requests for information hurdles so they can get those limited FEMA dollars, and then hopefully they can also get SBA dollars. So we tried to keep those DRCs open as long as we could to get as many people in, but also so that when you got the denial letter, you could go in and talk to somebody in person instead of trying to do it over the phone or on the computer, which inherently has access and functional needs challenges if you've got to do it over the phone or on a computer. So we wanted to keep those open as long as we could so that people could come in and ask those questions in person. And FEMA, depending on the season, depending on the number of disasters around the country, wants to get out of there, I wouldn't say as soon as they can, but they want to get out of the community because they've got another disaster to go to. And so we really tried to fight, and Annie did this a lot, to keep them there as long as we can. So those are a couple examples of how we are working to improve and strengthen our relationship with our community partners, and then also just some of the disaster experience. And then I'm happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you, Dave. While you're getting your questions ready, it's been a privilege for us, and I'm talking about HCRM, to work in Santa Cruz County. There's so many different things. One is, as we're a faith-based organization, we rallied the churches together it might have been 3 years ago, and we got the churches ready to go out and clean up the community. We did the same thing in Monterey with the Salinas churches. And so those are two communities that really understand partnership. And I love your comment and continuity, making sure that we're able to not have a pause in between. We need to have that continuity that goes straight across. The other thing I really love about Santa Cruz is the LTRG meetings are on the beach. So, I get sunburned. So, it's a beautiful area. Yeah. Questions? Oh, come on. You've got them. Come on. I've got one. Jorge in the very back.
My name is Jorge, originally from Santa Cruz, born and raised. Now I've been in Solano County working on Voad stuff and on the executive team there. My question, and we faced similar complications, was jurisdictions and navigating counties. For example, Pajaro, River Levee. I have families on both sides of the levee. And so one family member lives in Santa Cruz, the other one in Monterey County. How is that possible?
Yeah, could you, basically what his question is that how do the counties navigate from county to county? And so Dave will let you take that.
Yeah, it's a great example. So often jurisdictional boundaries don't define who and what people identify as their community. Our Pajaro residents that technically live in Monterey County identify themselves as Watsonville residents. Watsonville is a city inside the county of Santa Cruz. And I think one of the things to answer that question a little bit is that we at the government level, I have Dina, who spoke earlier, his cell phone. I have Kelsey, the director of emergency management in Monterey. So I have to have a better relationship, and we continue to build strong relationships with our operational area, that's the county boundary, our operational area partners that surround us. So that in Pajaro, as an example, for those that don't know, when the Pajaro levee flooded the town of Pajaro, those residents, Monterey County residents, were sheltered in a Santa Cruz County in the Santa Cruz County fairgrounds. So that initial relationship was started because we have a relationship with the fairgrounds to be able to operate a shelter there. So we opened those doors for them, and then once we recognized the duration of that recovery and that sheltering operation, they took over operation of it. But we stood together with them in the first days until they could take over on their own. So I think it really comes to relationship at the jurisdictional level to support community members that may straddle different jurisdictional boundaries, so that we can communicate. When that shelter was closing, we had some Santa Cruz County residents in that shelter that we weren't aware of. So that was an example to me that I need, if that situation, God forbid, repeats itself, I need to know who's in that shelter, because there may be somebody that's a resident of mine that we can then support. So it's really, again, the relationships are here at the CBO, NGO, government level, but it's also government to government.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Matt?
Yeah, this is a question for the table. It's kind of a follow-up about the difference between from county to county and the way that that Cal OES talks with and encourages county OESs and Voad work and the like. At United Way of Northern California, our 9-county territory, our region, we have 5 different Voads, and some of those Voads cross into multiple counties. So I'm the vice chair of the Butte Glen Voad. Theresa is the vice chair of the Shasta-Dama Voad, and then we have Trinity Voad, we have the Plumas County Voad, and we have the Siskiyou-Modoc Voad. And we're constantly coming up against the difference from county to county in the way that each county does their work in response to an emergency. And I'm just curious if the table could share a little bit about the way that they encourage the cross-jurisdiction work that you were just highlighting, but then also helping the counties understand about what the Voad can do in support. Thank you.
I'll give, one example, and not to entirely speak for my Monterey County counterparts, I think we need to all be in the same room together. So one of the things that we're doing in the aftermath of the flooding last year in Pajaro is the levee is actually being rebuilt in Pajaro. It's a levee that probably became outdated in the 50s or 60s, and it took basically a major act of state and federal legislation to get us the money to rebuild it. As part of that, we're creating an emergency action plan. And as part of that emergency action plan, there's a communication piece and a response piece. And what we're trying to do in that effort is to have our CBOs or our Voad members in the room with the 2 jurisdictions, the 2 operational areas, so that we can talk about how to collaborate better. But I will also say that there have been challenges where our organizations that operated predominantly inside our boundaries, extended their support into Monterey County. And because we didn't have a strong enough relationship with those partners as they leaned into that work in the other county, it created complications, right? So we, at the jurisdictional level, at the county OA to OA level, need to get together with our mutual partners that straddle both or serve both to make sure that lane development and that role development is clarified for each county if they're there, and then how to prioritize it, right? So I have a standby contract with an organization, and I can compensate them for the work that they may need to do in a disaster, and I need to make sure that Monterey County, as an example, has that same contract so that there isn't I'm going to get paid by Dave, but I'm not going to get paid by Kelsey, and that's not how we serve our community best, right? So we need to work together to strengthen our collaboration at the emergency management OA to OA level, for sure.
Great.
That was a really good response, and I just want to add, sometimes it's not just county to county, it's cities within counties and their jurisdiction, and then the county jurisdiction. They may have different impacts. Sometimes the city has a lot more, so that's critical, and I appreciate what you're saying. This is something we all need to look at from county to county, and some counties are so very, very different. Just the difference between Butte and Tehama for the park fire. Because fires are just going to keep moving. I mean, they touched a lot of counties, so did the Dixie fire, and every county had their own way of doing things. What I appreciate was on the voluntary organization level, how, for example, Butte Glen Voad, Shasta Tehama Voad came together to form an LTR, long-term recovery group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And is collaborating, working together, and also recognizing there's a massive impact here and a not so massive, and we need to find them. It's challenging, but they're working really hard among those two VOADs to make it a single, because it's one fire. It's one fire, not just this, oh, we're only going to help this county. I think it's really great that the VOADs collaborated to form this long-term recovery group.
I mean, if I could I'll add one point just because I think I'm obligated to say, disasters begin and end locally, and that is, localism is determinative, as our governor would say. We have this fortunate position at Cal OES to try and sit at the 30,000 foot level and see all things and be all things. At the end of the day, we support our cities and our counties. But I will say that the nonprofits on the ground are great eyes and ears for us, because I sit, quite literally, the BOC has no windows. So I sit in a windowless room in Sacramento. So who am I to tell you what is going on in your community? But if you hear about things, if you experience those sort of issues, I'm working in this county, things don't seem to be jiving. It's not that you're telling on them, but let Cal OES know, and we'll see if we could casually, through our regional partner, say, hey, were you aware? And let me tell you, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go, I actually didn't know that. And we'll see what we can fix. We can't make all sorts of guarantees, but if I don't know about a problem, I can't fix it.
The other thing I'd add, just on the all disasters are local, is that the organizations that you work for or that are part of a long-term recovery group often define local differently. And I think that's an important definition that we as government need to recognize, is that even, as I said, the second smallest county in the state, what happens in our Summit area is very different than what happens down in our Watsonville area or on our North Coast. So local can be hyper-local, and an organization can serve a hyper-local group. And so we, as local government at the county level, need to recognize that local can even be much, much smaller than our county boundaries, and we need to lean into that too.
Last question right here.
So, in addition to other things that have been brought up, I wanted to lift up the fact that the alerts that go out are not Title VI compliant, which is the civil rights, equality, and justice. Dang it, I can't come up with it. But the other thing is, there's nothing for folks who can't hear it, and there's little for folks, maybe I should say, that speak other languages than English. And for folks, I am not deaf or hard of hearing, and I don't know if there's anyone in this room who can speak better to this. But what I will say is that I've learned that some people, it's better if an interpreter is in the room. Some people are okay with video interpreters. Some people can do American Sign Language, ASL. It's important to find out what people need. And that is up to independent living centers. But I want to be clear that if we're talking statewide, there are 28 independent living centers for 58 counties. So you already know that some places have a very thin coverage ability. And we assume that when like there was a little fire in larger terms in the Oakland, in a part of Oakland recently, and they shot out a bunch of zone numbers. And so I was frantically writing, making sure that people understood, do you know where your zone is? Do you know what your number is? Do you know how to get it? And so it's up to us, but it's not just up to us. We have to make sure that, I guess I'm worried, how do we make that happen? What can the state do to help with that and make sure it happens? And I know it's also up to us, but we do our best and we need help.
So I know we're really short on time. I'll answer real briefly as a call to action for everybody in this room. So wireless emergency alerts, that's like when we send out something at the county level or the state level and it hits everybody's phone in a region. We can only do that in English and Spanish. We can only send NOAA weather radio messages, non-weather emergency messages in English. So our state and federal government and our technology, that now I have this smartphone that's smarter than me and it's got AI on it and all these things. We can do all these amazing things with technology, but we still can't send wireless emergency messages in more than 2 languages.
Why not?
Exactly. So it's one of those things that we need to work on at the state and federal level to motivate and put the money into the resources that can change that, so that either the cell phone provider automatically translates. If your phone is selected in a language, it automatically translates, and that should be some genius coder's side project, very easy to do. But right now, that's the reality, and so we need to advocate with our state and federal legislators to fix that, so that, you know, on one small level from a language standpoint, we get better communication to our community.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that. I want you to notice what we have here. This is our government partners. And the reason why I did not bring the Red Cross up to sit with the government partners is because I know the Red Cross feels the same way I do. I am so tired of people thinking that the Red Cross is government. They are not government. They are one of us. They're Voad. They're a very essential piece of what we do. So I want to introduce you to Jim Mollerus. And Jim is going to talk about mass care. And then, Jim, come on up, and we'll put you over here right next to, I want you guys to stay. And then I want to put you right over here next to Dave, if we can. And I'm going to hand you the mic. But I want you to notice one thing. When we're in the response phase of a disaster, this is our core. These are the ones that we respond to. And when we get into government-led, it starts with Dave, then it goes to Cal OES, but begins with us. But guess who responds immediately after the disaster? Mass care. Jim?
Yeah, Jim Mollerus. I have been a volunteer at the American Red Cross Silicon Valley chapter for about 11 years now. I am not Ginny Ortiz. Ginny wasn't feeling well, so she asked me to step in and present this to you today. And I really appreciate that request of her, because I love talking about the Red Cross and Red Cross mission and how we go about doing our business.
Point to the back of the room here.
Back of the room. There we go. So I'm going to talk about 3 things today. Mass care and our mass care services, and how important it is for us with the partnerships that we have with our VOADs, and as well as our government partners. And then we'll bring it in real terms at the end with a case study, something that really happened here in Santa Clara County not long ago. All right, the American Red Cross, let's get you grounded in what we are. We're not a government organization. However, we are chartered by the federal government to be the primary humanitarian disaster relief organization that helps out in national disasters and local disasters. You probably have all seen us on the 6 o'clock news. Hurricanes, wildfires, the Red Cross has a big presence. If you're a Red Cross volunteer in the room, you're probably inspired by some of those disasters like I was to get involved with the Red Cross. But we are chartered by the federal government. We rely on our volunteers and some staff and we're funded by donations to the American public. So we are not funded by the federal government. We're not funded by state governments. We are an independent organization. $65,000 disasters we respond to every year. That's a big number. Thank goodness they're not 65,000 Hurricane Miltons. Most of these are home fires. The large majority of these are home fires. Here in Santa Clara County alone, we respond to about 125 home fires every year. Fire departments, they do a great job of protecting life and property, but they don't help people out after the disaster. They call the Red Cross to come in and help out. We're 95% volunteers on our big disaster relief operations. 95% volunteers. So I wear a big button that says I'm a volunteer on a disaster, but know that we're not government, that we're not paid people. We are volunteers that are there to help because we want to help and serve. We have over 120 national partnerships. Some of them are represented here in the room today: Catholic Charities, Goodwill, the Southern Baptist, just a few. We have dozens and dozens of local partnerships as well that aren't included in that 120. All right, phases of the disaster. This is, we've all seen these three things: readiness, response, and recovery post-disaster. Mass care is the focus is on the response phase. Being the sheltering coordinator for the Silicon Valley chapter, I can tell you we're actually pretty involved in the readiness phase as well. We're very active on the readiness phase. But today we'll dive in a little bit deeper on that response element of what we do with Red Cross. 4 things we do in mass care with the Red Cross. The thing that we're known for, sheltering. We also are very involved with feeding people. You want to have a happy shelter, you better feed people. We also do distribution of emergency supplies. There are other organizations that do this as well. These are, taking the clean-out kits to the local communities. And we also have a reunification effort as well. We'll talk about each of these 4 elements right now. Sheltering. Red Cross sheltering is, it's basic. We are meeting the basic needs of people. Who's been in a shelter? Who's been into a shelter, right? They are adequate for keeping people safe, for getting them the resources they need to start their recovery path. It's not comfortable though. It's basic stuff. But we need to make sure that it's accessible by everybody. Accessible in that we can get to the site, we can get our clients to the site, and once they're there, they have all their accessibility needs met. That means that they can get around the shelter. If they have a second language that they use, that they can get all the communications that we have in whatever their language is. Suchi, thank you, Suchi, once again for hosting us, but thank you again for being such a good partner for us, because 2017 floods, half of our, let's get up to Suchi, half of our clients were displaced Vietnamese. And so they came down and they were in our shelter for providing translation services. All of our signage was done up in Vietnamese, and they were there to help us with the translation needs of those clients. We have 2 types of shelters that we run. The thing you see on the 6 o'clock news nowadays is congregate shelters. That's that high school gym that's now been converted into a living space for people that are displaced. Back in the pandemic days, 2020, 2021, we were doing primarily non-congregate shelters. That is hotel-based shelters. And we'll still do hotel-based shelters, but it has to be approved for and funded by a local jurisdiction, county or city. So congregate shelters is what we really focus on nowadays. Now, one thing that we do have a focus on is getting people out of shelters. Once again, they're adequate, but they're not a long-term recovery element for people. It gets them onto the recovery. It's a bridge for them. So in our shelters, hopefully we have FEMA TSA on larger events that's queued up quickly.
What's the TSA stand?
Oh, TSA, transitional, yeah. What does TSA stand for?
Transitional shelter assistance, temporary shelter assistance.
All right. And we have some financial assistance that the Red Cross can provide, but we also have community partners we bring in to help out as well. I'm the sheltering coordinator. I love closing shelters more than I like opening them, believe me. All right, feeding. We do a couple different kinds of feeding. We do mobile feeding. This is where we'll take the food to the communities and to the people out in the field. If you've seen the Red Cross trucks driving around in the disaster area, may be that they are some of our mobile feeding units. There can also be feeding centers. We can utilize our existing shelter sites oftentimes. Oftentimes, especially the more rural, the disaster area, and some of our folks that are in some of the more rural counties know this, that you get bigger populations that want to stay outside the shelter than they want to stay inside. And dormitory is just a service we offer at a shelter. At a shelter site, you can get access to everything that we offer at a shelter: health services, mental health services, casework, and feeding. We can also set up kitchens. We usually bring a partner in. The Red Cross, we do a lot of things really well. One thing we don't do very well is cook. So that's where we bring in folks like Salvation Army and World Central Kitchen to help with our feeding mission. We also try to do our best to meet the dietary needs of our clientele. Spiritual, health, religious needs can vary differently within the client population in the shelter. We try to meet all of those needs the best we can. Distribution of emergency supplies on larger disasters where there's a need for this. We'll bring in our DES group. Got that? DES? Distribution of emergency supplies.
I might mention that on the back of your programs, there is a list of acronyms. So we have Acronym Central on the back of each of your programs.
Yeah, so we will bring those supplies to Central Points of Distribution, CPODs. We'll also do mobile distribution. Those same trucks that may be doing feeding one day may be repurposed the next day to do DES drops. And these will be, things like cleaning products, the muck out kits, hygiene kits, blankets, clean water, PPE, those kinds of things. And it could look different depending on what's happening with the disaster. Here in Northern California, we're subject to wildfire. And so with the approval of county health, sometimes we will include sifting kits so people can sift through the ashes to find, things, tokens and whatnot, belongings from their destroyed homes. But we make sure we have the approval of the county health before we provide that. Reunification is the last of our 4 mass care services we provide. And this is where we want to get people reconnected to lost loved ones. And it's hard for people to think about their own recovery needs if they're too worried about getting reconnected with their loved one. We have, it's primarily digital nowadays. You can go and call 1-800-RED-CROSS and create a case. You can go to theredcross.org and get connected as well. And we work with partners to resolve this. We work closely with the local government agencies, the cities and counties, and plus some of our Voad partners. So components of mass care delivery: people, stuff, and partners. All right, so people, we have a lot of trained volunteers. In Santa Clara County, we have about 100 trained sheltering volunteers. We also have health services folks. We have mental health services. One thing I do say is disasters bring out the best in people. And so whenever we're responding to a disaster, we're not doing it in just this Red Cross vacuum. We have all sorts of people from the local communities who usually come out and want to get involved. And we'll find ways to get those local volunteers involved. We call them event-based volunteers, and they can be a great addition to our team. We've also bring in CERT members as well to help in our local shelters here in Santa Clara County. So, yay to CERT. Stuff. This is, by the way, this is about the most oversimplified chart. Cots, toiletries, buildings. The list is massive in terms of what we really need to run a shelter. And partners, we need partners for information. That's where we really need the help of the local jurisdictions and our emergency responding groups. CAL FIRE is a great partner in terms of their public information officers. And community connections. Our VOAD here in Santa Clara County is Cadre, and so we need their help as well. We'll see how that actually came through in the case study in a few minutes. All right, so sheltering. Working with partners. We don't own any of our shelter sites. We have 185 shelters alone, pre-identified, and that we've inspected. 185 in Santa Clara County. Every county throughout the country has Red Cross shelters. And their local teams are the ones who work to identify who those partners are. And that way we have a nice big roster. Some are as small as 25 people that they can support. Some are over 500. So we want a big roster of sites because we want to match the shelter to the size of the displaced population. Partners, accessibility. Red Cross doesn't do a lot of transportation. We look to partners to help us with the transportation needs of our clients. Interpreters, I've already mentioned Suchi, thank you again. But we bring in interpreters into our shelters. And a lot of things on health and dignity as well. So usually a lot of these things like showers and laundry, we'll work with our government partners to get those fulfilled at our shelter sites if we don't have those amenities on site. And we'll also work with different organizations for replacement of durable medical equipment. Medical equipment, glasses, those are a big need if you've lost those, any medications, clothing, those kinds of things. Feeding and distribution of emergency supplies. Once again, we have partners. I mentioned the Salvation Army, World Central Kitchen, and those are the ones who help us with preparing our meals for our clients. And we also have, we want to tap into the local community to help us better understand how we can meet the needs of our clients. I'll use that example of the 2017, the floods, and how we can better serve the Vietnamese community. Wound up being a real win, I think, on all sides for how we were able to change and pivot how we were supporting those clients independently to how much better we did it once we got more people involved, more groups involved. Reunification, it's primarily a lot of coordination with the law enforcement and the local government Office of Emergency Management. And with unaccompanied minors and separated child inquiries, we use the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So. All right, so we've heard about communication and coordination. It's so important for us to be really on top of this. I can't tell you how many times I've been a shelter manager or headquarters shelter manager where I'm in charge of all the shelters on a disaster, and I hear about, we've got Salvation Army that's delivering dinner at 6 o'clock, and some local group has just shown up to deliver dinner at 5:45. It's a waste. We've got too much food, not connected, so we need to make sure we know who to talk to, how you talk to it. We have a chain of command that we follow within the Red Cross. So we have specific paths of communication, and it's really important as we work together on these really complex disasters that we're really buttoned down on how we're coordinating and communicating. I have a saying, and you probably have heard it, of, go slow to move fast. Don't jump into something without being sure you know who to talk to first. All right, we're bringing home with our case study here. Atmospheric rivers, we've heard about this in a couple of other jurisdictions already. We had it activated here in Santa Clara County, January 2023. Red Cross is activated by the San Jose City, and we worked with them to identify a shelter site. And that was the Seven Trees Community Center. A week into this, we opened up a second one at Camden Community Center. The city was able to tell us the demographics of the displaced population. It's 100% pre-disaster homeless, so got us ready for that. We were able to get our trained workers at our shelters. Like I said, we brought the CERT members in to augment our team at one point. One thing that we identified was a need for interpreters. So this is where Cadre came in. Asked Marcia to help us out here. And she was able to get us, through Catholic Charities, some interpreters. Half of our population was Spanish speaking. Another critical need that we identified was clothing. Atmospheric rivers, pre-disaster homeless. Not anybody came in dry. Everybody came in wet. So they were able to help us get vouchers with the goodwill to help get clothes, clean, dry clothes for those people. Zion Ministries helped us with our sorting clothes. We had a lot of clothes that were donated at the shelter site, so they helped us sort through that so we can figure out which stuff could go directly to the clients and which we needed to have processed and laundered. There are some partners on here that aren't listed, and I'll call out some of our government partners. The Parks and Recreation group for City of San Jose, we ran a pet shelter, and it wasn't Red Cross folks that were running that. It was the City of San Jose. So I know I'm missing a few, but I'm getting the cue to wrap it up. So I think I'll end it here.
Just sit tight just for a moment, Jim. I'm going to take a liberty. I think I can do that because I am the chair, right? Yeah. Okay. The reason why I wanted you all to stay here for after Jim is, Dave, let's start with you. Tell me, we know that you activate and the importance. Can you tell us what the Red Cross means? And I also want to point out the Salvation Army is equal to what the Red Cross does. They may be a little bit smaller on the comparison, but we have a wonderful chapter of Salvation Army here as well. So Dave, tell us a little bit about how the relationship between the two of you work.
Yeah, I'll highlight the staffing part of that oversimplified model to start with, right? So as a small county, a small governmental organization, we struggle with shelter staffing. And so we try to train some of our county employees to be shelter managers or shelter support staff, but we lean on our relationship and the strength of our relationship with Red Cross to help us and either lead that or help train the folks, especially if it's a long-term sheltering mission, because we struggle to have those people doing that work day in and day out at the, if they're government employees. That's one way which we work together with Red Cross.
Awesome, thank you. And Zach or Valerie, where does the state get involved when it comes to working with the Red Cross?
For Cal OES as opposed to California Department of Social Services back there. So we would primarily at the local assistance center level. We are, and you usually already are partnered with the county. So the first thing they say is, "Oh, we've already been in touch. They're coming." But during those atmospheric rivers last year, I had multiple contacts with Red Cross because the volunteers would come in and come out, and because we were learning of all those language needs, you guys were able to really help. However you did through your local partners in all of those darn counties, help meet those needs with mental health, crisis counselors. There were other pieces, but we couldn't have done it, and I kept having a statewide partner. There were just so many. We had multiple ones going on at once. So we had so many needs that I was able just to touch the Red Cross with and ask if they didn't already call me first. And what are your needs for this one? How can we help?
Yeah, thank you, Valerie. Zach, anything you want to add to that?
No, as Valerie mentioned, the California Department of Social Services is the state mass care lead. We've got our friends in the back. You can tell because they have the best swag of all state agencies. If you would mind standing up and showing off the jackets, yeah.
Yes.
Big fan.
Thank you.
There we go. If state service, civil service, it's you get some perks every once in a while. Low pay, good swag. But I want to foot stomp that there's a number of, I think when we think of Red Cross, we think of sheltering, heads in beds. But in reality, as mentioned, there's this huge Red Cross apparatus that comes with that. So even if there isn't a mass care and shelter operation, making sure that it's happened to all those other Red Cross services is important to us.
Great, thank you. Jim, I want to thank you very much for your presentation, and I want to say this to you in the nicest way possible, but you got to put $1 in the pot. I saw that. How many PPE? Yeah, you failed to mention what PPE is. I paid your $1. You're okay. But thank you all so much. This has been a great session.